how all these people are gravitating towards the Shimano booth, it's kind of nice, because I still remember back in the 70s when the European peloton wouldn't even think of using our components in races. Now we got guys like Thor Hushovd winning races on them, so it's fantastic.
And that's interesting. I mean, it's kind of hard when you look at Shimano today to imagine that you went through these growing pains, but actually you did. And I'm wondering, I mean, that if you're talking about going back to the late 70s, you really were not even a teenager at that point, right?
Well, I was still going to school, maybe grade school. I think I was starting to go into high school, but you could see these things. I remember after graduating from high school, we took a family trip to Europe, and all my brother and I wanted to do was go watch a stage of the tour. And it was great because all these Campy-equipped teams are winning, and the Shimano-equipped teams would be lucky to win a stage here or there, because the components were considered Japanese toys. They weren't considered real bike parts. But things have changed over 30, 35 years.
Well, I mean, is there a defining moment when you feel like that all of a sudden that you had this credibility, or has it been building gradually?
I think it's more of a gradual process, but you can see these steps along the way. When teams, Campy-sponsored teams, would come to us and say, well, we'd consider using your components if you gave us enough money.
Right.
And then we just go, no, we're okay. We don't want to buy the win. We'll wait till we equip a team and win the particular races, and we're fine. So when you started seeing that happen, it was kind of a nice feeling that the components were actually in demand, that they were being recognized for how good they were. I think when we came up with index shifting, that's what defined Shimano, because that's what we did that no one else did. Then from there, all these things started building up. Like we did Hyperglide, we did STI shifters, and now we're even thinking about electronics. But it all goes back to that index shifting.
Sure.
That's when we came out with something that the other guys didn't want to do or couldn't do, and we could do it.
The Shimano lineage. So it was your grandfather that started the company in the 1920s, is that correct?
Yes, in 1921, my grandfather founded Shimano, had a little office and factory. He was building single-speed freewheels, and that was the original product. And we still make that product to this day.
And is it true there's a story that your grandfather had a deal that maybe they weren't so reliable at that point, not Shimano, but the other freewheels that were on the market, and he kind of had a unique approach to getting people to use Shimano, which was, if it breaks, I'll give you two, something like that?
You're right, Dave. It was, back then, all the best bikes and bike products in the world were made in England. So if it wasn't made in England, it wasn't worth its weight. So what my grandfather had to do was he'd say, here, I'll leave this part with you, and I know it's going to work. But just in case it doesn't, I'll come back later, and I'll give you two more if this one breaks. Well, the company survived, so I think he was making a pretty good product.
No, I would have to agree. And so then we'll run it down a little further for us. So your grandfather had 3 sons, is that correct?
Yes, he had 3 sons, Shozo, Keizo, and Yoshizo. And I'm part of the 3rd generation of the Shimano family, where there's myself, my brother, and 2 cousins, of which one of the cousins is now running Shimano.
And now how many of the Shimano clan, for lack of a better term, are in the United States now?
There are 2 of us. There's my brother and myself, and we're working out of the U.S. office. The rest of the folks are interspersed throughout the world. It's hard to keep track of all the cousins and second cousins now, but I hear they're working in factories in China, in the Czech Republic, and so forth and so forth. So you're bound to run into a Mr. Shimano somewhere at some trade show.
You really are a bike racing fan, aren't you?
I'm a fan of bike business. So it's the bike business, selling the parts. I'm a fan of riding. I ride all the time. And I enjoy watching the races because that's the pinnacle of the sport that we all love. So to watch these guys perform at their best is a sight to see. That's why I go to the races, and it's part of the obligation of being in the business that you have to put back into the sport what you get out of it.
Well, I will say clearly that Shimano is absolutely the pinnacle as far as that goes. So continue making great bike parts, and we'll look forward to seeing you at more races.
Well, thanks, Dave. I appreciate the time.